107 nationwide.
In business, a rand saved is a rand earned. And almost 100,000 businesses trust OUTsurance.
We're a sealing and partition company. I like OUTsurance. They have that personal touch. In addition to the great service they give me, they've also saved me and my company 3,266 rand per month. Guys, make that call. It's well worth it.
For your business insurance, contact OUTsurance to see how much your business could save. SMS quote to 43328 for immediate cover, or visit outsurance.co.za today. A licensed insurer FSP. T's and C's online.
S3 and Lorna Maseko are adding flavor to your Wednesday evenings. Lorna invites you on a journey of discovering new ways of transforming South African pantry staples into delectable and budget-friendly meals. From reimagining traditional South African dishes to infusing global inspirations, Lorna's inventive recipes and seasoned cooking tips inspire creativity and will empower viewers to navigate the kitchen with savvy resourcefulness. Tune into Lorna's Pantry, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
A lot of people come up to me and they say to me, Claire, how did you know that you wanted to do what you were doing? How did you know? Because I'm confused. A lot of people, especially after the lockdown, after the pandemic, people now really want to work meaningful jobs. They want to do something that's on purpose. People want to be true to themselves, and they think, I just don't want to do this job. I don't love it. I don't know what I want to do with my life. How do you know? I don't have the answers, but I tell people perhaps the clue lies in your younger self. What was your younger self doing before there were negative labels put on it? Before somebody told you you can't make a career out of that? Before you then internalized that as a limiting belief? Perhaps the clues to your purpose, maybe the clues to your destiny lie in your younger self that was not affected by judgment. Today, I challenge you all, if you are looking for answers, to reconnect with your younger self.
What wise words from Ms. Claire Mawisa, a media personality, television broadcaster in this country, very well-known name. Welcome to The Talking Point. It is 10 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the first hour of the show as we lead conversations that move us. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana, and always looking forward to your company over the next couple of hours. So today, I guess one could say it's D-Day for the Finance Ministry, for the Finance Minister as well, as we're expecting the tabling of the budget later on this afternoon. And certainly there continue to be different expectations of what should come out of the budget, what we should be looking at. So I'm expecting that will also be part of the conversation that we have on the open line. It is your national roundtable. Let's get the conversation going. Of course, you can call into our studio line on 086 000 2032. That's 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. That's 0614 104 107. And of course, there's plenty for us to talk about this morning. We can get into the budget speech. In fact, for Citizens Corner, we're going to be looking at the budget speech, but really from the perspective of austerity measures, and in particular the impact on public services. And we'll be joined by that in that particular conversation by Michael Sachs, who is adjunct professor of public economy at the Edwards University. Will be joined by Itumeleng Motlhabane, who is the acting Deputy Secretary General for Equal Education. And we'll also be joined by Greg Rammejo, who is a government and public services leader at Deloitte. And all of them will be helping us unpack the issue of the budget in as far as it relates then to services, There also seems to be many views that say that we could well be in for a VAT increase this afternoon. I don't know. And one just thinks about, well, what would the implications of such an increase be for the economy right now, given the state of the majority? So I guess it will also be important to have them weigh in on that particular angle. And then the final hour of the show, of course, as we talk budget, one of the big issues that we are dealing with as a country is around the unemployment figures. So we've brought in the unions who will be weighing in on the state of unemployment in the country, but also then to say, right, what is their role? Because what we know is that there are jobs that are available in the labor market, and sometimes the skills that we have do not always match up to where the opportunities are opening up. And what role then do unions see themselves playing in this broader conversation? And how is it that they're also helping the workforce prepare for whatever changing skills of the present, but most importantly of the future, to prepare for those skills and ensure that they are able to transition, especially in certain jobs that are going to come under threat, particularly when we talk about transitioning. One can think of the energy sector for one, but it's not the only one. It's not the only sector that will be affected. So we'll take a look at that in the final hour of the show. For now, it is the open line, your national roundtable. I'll take your calls on any matter you want to place on the national agenda. And I wonder then what you also make of the reconfiguration that has finally happened within the ANC. They've been threatening, they've been talking, and it looks like they've brought in the veterans, old hands, to come and assist in as far as getting Gauteng and KZN back on track. I wonder if it's going to be what it takes, really, to help revive the organization, to help it turn it around, turn its fortunes around from what they experienced in the May elections of 2024. More than happy to take your views on that too. All right, let's take a quick break, and I'm back with your calls on the open line.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Fizzy drinks and fruit juices can make our children sick. Sugar is dumped into their bodies with every sip, which could lead to obesity, heart disease, and diabetes as they age. We must protect them from drinks high in sugar. Demand a stricter health promotion levy now. Sign the petition on heala.org. That's HEALA.org.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, I'm going to start off on the road this morning. Silo, good morning.
How are you, Siskesi?
I'm good, thank you. It doesn't say which part of the country you're in, so maybe you are on...
I'm approaching, I'm approaching Middleburg.
Wonderful.
Middleburg, yeah, in Eastern Cape.
In Eastern Cape?
Yes.
Is there a Middleburg in the Eastern Cape?
Is it Eastern Cape or Northern Cape? Somewhere there. Next to Bolisbeek, somewhere there.
Middleburg. Is Middleburg not in Mpumalanga?
There is another Middleburg this side of Eastern Cape, from Craddock to Bolisbeek. There is a Middleburg somewhere.
Oh, really? Okay, it's my first time hearing of it. All right, Silo, what do you want to talk about this morning?
Yes, Laura Maseni is very worried about the entertainment industry. My problem is this, as every year minister is increasing alcohol, and I don't know why. I wonder if they are trying to kill the entertainment industry. Because if they increase alcohol every year, now we are having the problem of counterfeit of alcohol, like our whiskeys and our cognac. We are having the phone calls in this case. It is the minister this year, instead of increasing the alcohol, he can increase the beef or the mutton or cigarettes. Because now, even now, our stock sales are going high because now we have to pay something like 1,200 rand a month for our stock sale of alcohol.
Silo, tell me more about your alcohol stock fell. How does it work?
Last year, we were contributing 1,000 rand a month. Then at the end of the year, we go and buy alcohol for everyone, according to our taste of alcohol. So this year is 1,200 because of this increment of every year of budget speech.
And how many are you? How many of you are there in the Stokvel?
12.
That's a lot of alcohol, Silo.
It's not a lot, it's not a lot. At least from December, it lasts until after Easter.
Sure, okay. So you want then to see the price of alcohol staying the same. You'd rather have increases in beef. But that's meat, that's staple. Beef is already expensive, Silo. And more people eat beef than consume alcohol.
Yes, but they are killing entertainment industry.
Yeah, but
and now
how is alcohol part of the entertainment industry, Silo?
It's one thing and the same. It's a finger and a nail. You can't go to entertainment without alcohol.
You can.
It's not nice.
Entertainment is not nice with that. So Silo, you guys spend 172,800 on alcohol.
Yes, we are like people who love clothes, who can spend 5,000 rand on a sneaker.
Sure. Wow. Okay. From your lips, hopefully, to ministers' ears, Silo doesn't want to spend more on alcohol than he already does. You heard his story. 172,000 rand. That's basically 173,000 rand. All of it on alcohol. Alcohol that's finished by the time we get to Easter. They buy in December and it's done by Easter. 4 months. So it's literally just 4 months worth of alcohol. Hey, I think I'm in the wrong industry. I must go join the alcohol manufacturers. Anonymous, you're calling from Soweto. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. What I want to make people aware of, ANC, these people of ANC are taking the people for a ride. Before they were stealing, man. They said ANC is not stealing. It's the people who hate ANC who said ANC are stealing. Secondly, for that matter, they said no, ANC is not stealing, is an individual who's stealing. But now everybody can see that ANC is stealing. They're taking people for a ride this time. ANC we must get rid of ANC, because even Credo said we are going to gain the power, but we are going to lose it back to the people. So they must, if at all they are clever, these people, they must vote ANC, because the affair of Steve Biko was being done by ANC, because now they hide the truth. They put the people on a blank page that they must know. They criticize ANC left side, right. ANC, they are stealing. Zuma was stealing with the Gupta. Now he said he's going to do better with the MK. Now Cyril Ramaphosa, he said Tumamina, but he's doing nice. They are taking people for the right, these people of ANC. We must get rid of them, Katie. Thanks, Katie.
Okay, all right, Anonymous out in Soweto feeling very strongly there. I think really pointing to the fact that as far as he's concerned, some of the changes within the ANC may not necessarily help to save the organization, right? And I just one has to remember, one has to think about what happened in the Northwest Province when, that particular province was reconfigured. You had, at least at the time, they were outright calling it a disbandment of the PEC, not really a reconfiguration as it's said today. Do you think the Northwest has ever recovered from that as a province? So one wonders then, what will be the impact of this organization, of these two provinces? What will be the impact of that on the organization? Is it something that branches will buy into? Will they support? How long how far will the impact that the leadership wants to see it having, how far will that impact actually go? Pumzile, you're out in Gqeberha. Good morning. Good morning, Pumzile.
Hello.
Yes, you're live on the radio.
Yeah, Pumzile from Gqeberha.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
And I'm phoning with a concern about the graveyard where kulele amakhawe emlotheni. That place is neglected. You can hear me? Hello?
Yes, Fuzile. I'm listening to you tell us about what is happening at this graveyard.
Now I'm concerned about that place. That place is neglected. When I asked our councillor here, he said that place was a tender, and that tender is over now. I was so flabbergasted because how can a hero's it's like a hero's acre. Give somebody a tender, their tender is off now. That place is nobody cares about that place. It's where they will let about Muslim fire. Now, Muslim who do not have was at all of that place. I don't know where the Masparad is aware of that, but he is aware. They are aware, but they choose to neglect it. You hear me?
Yeah, Fuzile, you're not the only listener to raise issues about the upkeep of graveyards.
Can you listen to your voice? I can't hear you.
Are you struggling to hear me, Fuzile? Can you hear me
Hello?
any better now?
That's very low.
All right. I think you might be in an area with bad connection, Fuzile, so maybe you want to listen on the radio.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, look, Fuzile, there clearly is an issue with the connection. So, like I said, just try listen on the radio. You're not the only listener to raise the issue of the state of our graveyards in different parts of the country, because people are calling in and sending in WhatsApp voice notes talking about graveyards. And as things stand, we're getting complaints from different parts of the country, and it could well be worth it looking into just why it is that there is such neglect. And as you're saying, the answer you've been given is that the fact that the contract has ended and therefore nobody's being paid to actually keep up that graveyard. But it again comes back to what is happening at local government, those budget allocations. These are just basic services, right? Basic services that need to be fulfilled. So we'll have to find a way of doing that story and trying to see, because graveyards is not really a national mandate, right? It's broken down to provinces, to municipalities, where each municipality then would have to ensure that those services are provided. But it's certainly something for us to think about, so that we're able at least to empower you with the information you need in terms of following up and holding those officials that need to be doing that work accountable. Let me go to Pretoria. Is it Itani? Good morning, Itani.
Hi, good morning, Cathy. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Cathy, man, I want to raise the issue of the water billing from SOS in Pretoria, where I'm staying. I'm staying in the flat. You won't believe, Cathy, I pay water more than electricity. Last month, I paid 527. I'm staying alone in my unit. This month, they need 568. Last night, I was discussing this issue with my neighbor. They're saying there are 4 in the flat, but this month they are going to pay 380 something. So my concern, I send an email to SOS. They say it's how the meter readings billing. But I say I won't understand, because like December, I was not even in the flat. I was on holiday. I was home. But still, they're still gonna bill me. When I'm asking, they say it's a normal rate. How can they bill me 330 rand while there was nobody in the flat for a period of a month?
Look, Danny, you one of the issues is that often these companies tend to work on estimates, right? Where you find that yes, you're living by yourself, but because the average in the area that you're in is perhaps a certain figure, then you're almost paying the same as a family of 3 or family of 4 in the same area, and I imagine that you're working off of a similar system, hey?
Yeah, but look, on that one, I really do understand. But how can I pay more water than electricity? How can it possible? Where I was saying before, it's around Pretoria. It's not far away from the new unit. I was paying close to, if the billing is too much, it must be maybe 75 rand per month. Now I can pay 527 just for the water. I didn't even pay that electricity. How is possible? I tried to contact City of Tshwane. They say there is nothing to do with them. It's between me and the SOS. So I don't know.
And who is SOS?
SOS, I don't know. It's maybe the third parties. Those people who are billing. I don't know. I think it's the people who get the tender from the municipality so that they can bill the water rating. I don't even know them. Those people. They are the one who send us the statement every month.
So you don't get the statement from the municipality?
No, and then when I contact the municipality, they say there is nothing to do with them. It's between me and then SOS. Because I raised this issue with OSS, and how can you bill me? Because the whole month of December I was not even in the unit. But how can I pay 330? Now they say I have to pay 527. Last month I paid 527. Now they need 569. I'm staying alone in the unit.
And when you call these individuals from SOS, what are the kind of answers that they give you?
They are very rude. I also contact them with the email. I speak to this other lady. They are very rude. I try to make a negotiation for the installment. If maybe they can allow me to pay this money for 2 months or 3 months. They don't want to. If you didn't pay, they tell you straight to your face that we are going to switch off the water, and for you to reconnect it, you have to pay extra 500 or 900.
Yeah.
Immediately when they switch off the water, even the electricity at the same time.
Okay. Aitani, we're going to have to look into the issue. Thank you for raising it with us. I certainly haven't heard of SOS and the role that they are playing when it comes to revenue collection in the city of Tshwane. So we'll have to do a bit of work to find out what exactly is going on, okay?
Yeah, please, okay, man, do something about that one. Or unless if maybe the city of Tshwane can bill us straight from the city of Tshwane than from the state parties, because we are paying too much.
Yeah.
We are
All
paying
right.
too much, to be honest.
All right, Adani. Thanks for calling in. He's out in Pretoria, and of course, if his bill is that much, it's significantly higher than what it used to be. There's a question about this middleman. If it is a middleman, how much of a markup are they putting on these prices? Okay, we'll take no, it's not a break. It's the latest news headlines. We'll take the latest news headlines, and then I'm back with more of your calls.
Good morning. In the headlines, experts have suggested South Africa's state-owned enterprises should be categorized into strategic and non-strategic entities. The suggestion comes ahead of the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. A number of buildings and vehicles have been damaged after a tornado hit Montana in northern Pretoria last night. Several residential complexes in the area have been left exposed to the rain, especially on the upper floors, as roofs have been badly damaged. And Hamas says it's ready to release all the hostages in the second phase of the ceasefire deal with Israel. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
Hey, listen up. With our Blue Sky offers, you can get your dream Ford with our optional service plan, and our Ford Family Guarantee comes standard. Think extensive dealer network, genuine Ford parts, and express service. Visit your trusted Ford dealer for the complete Ford ownership experience. Limited time offer while stocks last. T&Cs apply.
Santam can cover your car in just 2 minutes. That's faster than you microwaving your leftovers. Realizing they're still cold? Giving them a second chance. Realizing they're still cold? And eating them anyway. Because you've already committed to it. Get your car covered in just 2 minutes so you can live in the moment, not in the worry. Visit santam.co.za. Santam. This is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
36-year-old Jay loves Outsurance Essential because it's low-cost insurance designed for older cars. For her 2013 Ford Figo 1.4 Ambient, she only pays 400 Rand a month. With Outsurance Essential, you get up to 1 million Rand liability cover. That means if you cause an accident, the other car could be covered for up to 1 million Rand. Even more value with the motor warranty, which covers you for mechanical or electrical breakdowns. Get saving with Outsurance Essential for unfinanced cars older than 5 years and valued at less than 130,000 Rand. SMS CAR to 43187. That's CAR to 43187 today. Licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and information online.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to SAFM listeners. Happy Wednesday. Here, Cathy, I love SuperSport United. I love SuperSport United. I'm a Tanzanza. I love it. You know why I love the Humble Chiefs? 4-1. 4-1. I really love SuperSport. Gavin, and you do a good job last night. A good job for me. Now it's quiet. Even at work, it's quiet. People are hiding themselves. I don't know what's going on. It's Honorable Magruka Kubana. Danko!
Morning, Cathy. Yes, Sipo here in the Eastern Cape. There is a Middelburg in the Eastern Cape, just past Nowport, on your way to Port Elizabeth. Thank you.
So you want then...
Sorry, good morning, SAFM. Good morning to all the listeners and Cathy. Cathy, I'm listening to your conversation with Sillo about alcohol and how he's unhappy about the fact that they have to now add an extra 200. So they've been taking out 1,000 Rand a month for alcohol. This is a stock fare that they have. Whereas, that's why last year, South Africa had spent over 7.7 billion just on alcohol. This guy is crying instead of them thinking about investing or building some infrastructure or build something of value in our communities. The one thing that they're crying about is alcohol. This guy is crying about the fact that the alcohol is more expensive. These guys invest so much money in drinking. This is actually quite ridiculous, to be honest. Chapo from Potchefstroom.
Good morning, Sister Cathy. This is Matubolo. Yeah, Sister Cathy and Minister Godongwana must talk more about food prices. Food is very expensive in South Africa. Yeah, I think more when it comes to even electricity. It's very expensive. Nobody can afford electricity in this country. So Minister Godongwana must talk with people, not with rich people only. This is Matubolo.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Yeah, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. Zaki, you're right. The issue of electricity and its price is just such a burning point for many South Africans, because the price has just meant that it is inaccessible to so many people. So, what is the benefit of having an electricity line if you actually can't afford then to buy electricity because its price is just so high? Look, Tsepo, what do they say? Don't they say that we all have our vices? Hey? Silo's vice happens to be alcohol. That is, he is investing in his entertainment pleasure. Him and his group of members of the Stokvel. Yeah, that's what they choose. That's their hill. Let me continue taking your calls on the open line. Of course, you can dial in on 086 000 2032 on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614104107. Sure, I've still got so many calls to get through. Okay, let me keep it moving. Anonymous, you're in Durban. Good morning.
Cathy, and thank you for answering my call. Cathy, I'm one of the pensioners. There has been a call for us to go and change our card, a gold card, to a certain bank. Cathy, I have been going there since Thursday last week, Friday and Monday. Monday, I couldn't cope up. My feet were so swollen up because we're standing outside the sun, and I'm diabetic. I've got kidney problems. The thing is that, Cathy, when you go there, you stand on the sun, you stand in a queue, and eventually at 4 o'clock, I've got there at about 7 o'clock. Eventually, when you get there, when it's about 4 o'clock, you decided to go because the queues, the lines are so huge, and we don't know what's happening. And the following day, you must go at the back of the line. There is no system whatsoever. And we keep on going like this. And there is another people that keep on telling us that they've been coming for a week. There is absolutely no system. The worst part of it, there is a guy who's selling chairs. If you can order the chairs, or you can buy the chairs or borrow the chairs, with 50 rand to sit on, and then you can sit. If you don't have, you have to sit on the ground. There are no toilet facilities. You stand there the whole day. From some of us, they come at about 6 o'clock. And it's unbelievable. The worst part of this, the whole situation, there is a guy who will come in front of us, in front of the line, with the people. And these people, we don't know these people are coming from, and they will go and get their cards in front of us. And because we are with these young girls that are collecting children's grant, they saw everything. There was a big fight. They nearly caused a stampede over us because they were shouting at this guy, "Why are you bringing these people? Did they pay 50 rand?" We were just hearing that. I'm not sure whether it's an allegation, whether it's true, but it's worse, Cathy.
And Anonymous, tell me, which part of Durban are you in? So where did all of this happen?
Yeah, we are at Boxer in Isipingo. It's chaotic, Cathy. There is no line. And we haven't seen a SASSA official. My question is this. If at the end of the day, on the 20th of March, we don't get our card changed, because I think the idea of making them so slow, it's because for us to cough out these 50 rand so that they can collect the money. Because I heard the other guy said, look how much money we can make. He was just talking to another guy. So I'm not sure whether that's the situation. Because, I mean, you cannot believe that people can go 4 times yesterday and today. I'm trying to cool off my feet because I've got kidney problems. But I'm not asking for a better treatment, because all of us, grannies there, have got problems. There was another guy who couldn't stand on his feet. He was sitting down all the time. So we want the people who can work and let us go home. I do not believe, Cathy, that we can stand there from 7 o'clock until 4:15 when we decide to go home, because we're rushing away for the big rush.
Anonymous, are you able to see how many people are actually inside assisting you as recipients, as SASSA recipients?
We can't see. I heard there were 3. I heard there were only 3. My question to that SASSA spokesperson is that if he does not, SASSA official doesn't come and see in these areas how people are worked, or how many people, how can they change their system to work better for the people?
All right.
And on top of that, if we eventually don't get our card changed, how would he know that we have been going there and nothing has been done for us? How would we explain that to them? And eventually we won't get our money. They will say we did not go there because there is no proof that I have been going there.
Okay.
Now I'm making a proof with you.
All right. Anonymous, thank you so much for calling in, raising that issue with us. Anonymous out in Durban, we have known just how much of a difficulty this issue of the transfer of cards has been. But certainly when you hear somebody like Anonymous speaking about the experience, it helps to put it into context, part of the chaos that has been experienced. And she's right. You can't go stand in a queue from 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 p.m. over a number of days and still not get the help that you need. Surely we should be doing better than this. Gavin, you're in Beckersdale. Good morning.
Cathy, and to FM listeners. This case, I wanted to speak about youth unemployment. Because our youth now are trapped in poverty. I was suggesting that most of the skills development that are done in prisons, that are taken advantage of by foreign nationals, can't we have them taken back, like before 1984, where people will be taught bricklaying, painting, upholstery, all these kind of skills, so that they can be mobile. They can try to at least do something to put something on the table. As it is, they've got nothing, even the skills. My other suggestion would be for Africa Trade, we have maybe once a week a person from Department of Foreign Affairs, just to tell us the skills that are needed in these different 54 African countries, where we can take our young people are mobile, where they can go to those areas. Maybe in Zimbabwe they have the skill, maybe let's say plumbing, maybe in Madagascar, people that can work in the hotels. Then our young people can move and see the world and open up and let us participate in Africa Free Trade. Thank you very much.
All right, Gavin, those are some of Gavin's ideas. Let's find different ways of skilling young people. Much of it also has to do with the curriculum, right? I was part of that first generation of OBE. Remember, outcomes-based education. So as things were changing, we moved from, having classes where people used to learn how to bake, how to sew, and some of the equipment was still, all there in the classrooms, but, we're told that, no, this is not for us because the curriculum has changed, so we're not going to get to learn any of that stuff. And then you realize as you grow older that actually I would have benefited a lot from knowing how to sew my own clothes or how to bake my own food. So I think it also has to do with the curriculum and what we have chosen to prioritize, or how we've set up the curriculum. Stanley, you're in Everton. You've got some advice for Itani, or when it comes to his problem with power and this entity that he calls SOS. Do you know SOS, Stanley? Do you know the work? Are you familiar with their work?
Hi, morning, Cathy. And thank you for taking my call. I don't actually know this company in particular, but from my own personal experience, I'm under Midval. That's where I stay. So what would normally happen is that if you are not the one who's taking the meter readings, maybe taking a picture of your meter number and the readings, and send that directly to your local municipality or whoever is in charge and who has to reconcile your consumption of water, then they are going to work on the estimates. And I think that is what Mr. Itan is currently facing, because they are billing him on that average consumption that maybe the previous person was paying there, or maybe the other people in the same area are being billed. So he needs to find a way to handle that process by himself, to send the readings directly to the municipality.
Yeah, but he says the municipality says they're not in charge of that process, because even the statement he gets is not directly from the municipality. It's from this company called SOS.
Yeah, and then in that case, he needs to send the readings to that company, because they are not coming in and checking the consumption. They're just working on estimates. He needs to just take over and send them the readings. Then they will charge him the accurate consumption. That is the only solution.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Stanley. Thanks for that. Thanks for that advice, Stanley out in Everton. And Stanley's right. That is part of the solution that you can offer up, especially if you're challenging your bill, right? Because if you have the correct reading of your meter at the time, then you're able to substantially show that what they are billing you for is different to what you have on record. So yeah, keep us posted, Danny, with how it goes. Is it Loward? Loward, you're in Guyana. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Let me cut to the chase. I want to talk matters concerning the African National Congress and the long-awaited decisions which have been taken by our NWC and subsequently our NEC in regard of the reconfiguration, or you can say, if you like, reinforcement of our provincial executive councils in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Yes, Cathy, it is in the public domain that we lost a massive electoral support in both those provinces. So as a party, our officials and all those who are in the leadership roles, they were supposed to take action to counter the decline that we suffered in both provinces. So some of us, or let me say most of us, we welcome the appointment of both Comrade Jeff Habele and Comrade Amos Masondo as conveners in both those provinces. And bearing in mind that those comrades are in their pension age, if I may put it that way. Therefore, they are not having ambitions to can contest for any provincial leadership role in the upcoming provincial conferences, hopefully by next year. So most of us, we do welcome the decision that has been taken to can stabilize our structures from the branch level to the regional level and even to the provincial level of both those provinces. So that is my take as a member of the African National Congress. That we welcome that decision, Cathy. I know that there are some who are not welcoming the decision, but in the ANC, as we all know, that we cannot be agreeing on a singular matter or on a singular decision. So most of us, we do welcome the decision, and then we'll be observing as to how those comrades are going to stabilize our structures going forward.
All right, Lord out in Guyana, vote of confidence from him in the move then to restructure, reconfigure Gauteng and KZN ANC structures. Let's take a quick break. I'm back with more of your calls.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
The Mangaung Metro Municipality is hosting an investment summit to bring investment to Bloemfontein. The summit will take place on 19 and 20 February at the City Hall and aims to bring together different economic role players from across the country and abroad. To be part of the summit or for more info, call 073 184 8972 or send an email to summit@mangaung.co.za. Mangaung, at the heart of it all.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on The Talking Point. Lirotodi, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy.
Yes.
Yes, Cathy. Yeah, you must travel in South Africa so that you will know these two midlivers in South Africa.
Okay, little Toddy. I see you're throwing me under the bus this morning. It's okay. I'll take it. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, I want to talk about two female police officers. The one they were assaulting a young woman when she was reporting a matter. That matter was all over on the social media. You remember that case?
Which one, little Toddy?
The two female police officers. They shown be assaulting a young woman in the police station. The woman, as she came to report the matter, and then she get assaulted by two female police officers.
When did it happen?
I think it's 2 weeks back. It was saying it on the social media and on the news also.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was hearing like they were already suspended on duty. No, my question here, Cathy, is why people in South Africa, we are not equal in rule of law? Because this thing of assault is like it's legalized by ANC. It's legalized. By the time when Grace Mugabe come and beat our young woman here, and that lady, she was bleeding after she'd been beaten by Grace Mugabe. And then a very same ANC as a ruling party, they awarded Grace Mugabe a diplomat protection. What makes Grace Mugabe special compared to another woman in South Africa where they assault with a lot of knives? What makes Grace Mugabe special? Because she is a politician. The politicians that are above the law in South Africa, each and every time when they have a matter, their matter is disappearing. And again, it was a reckless parliament here in Miran called a Pan-African parliament, where we see a reckless behavior of the politician inside the parliament. For me, Jordina of ANC, she received a kick. She has been kicked by a Senate politician. the case has been withdrawn. Because of what? He kicked by the politician. But people can come out on the television saying to assault a woman is a very serious matter in South Africa. Well, the Premier Majorina withdraw the case. So my question here is, why are we not equal in rule of law? What about the why the politicians that are above the law in South Africa? We are not treated equally here.
So Lerotodi, just to understand, just to make sure I understand the fullness of the point that you're making, because action has been taken against these police officers. Do you feel that they were treated differently in this instance?
Yeah, they were treated differently. They were not supposed to be done anything. They were supposed to stay in the job. If Grace Mugabe cannot be arrested, why them? Why them? What makes them different between them? Because they do the same as Grace Mugabe did in South Africa. And then another woman, parliamentarian, awarded Grace Mugabe. That woman, the parliamentarian, it was Maitenkwan Mashaman, who awarded Grace Mugabe a diplomat protection. And then by that time, when we were making us asking, by that time, Fikile Mbalula was the minister of the police. He was already telling us we are going to hand her over to the police. Well, Fikile Mbalula knowing very well, Grace Mugabe, she was already awarded diplomat protection. But now, the case of Phumuwa Jodina, why did she withdraw the case? If to assault a woman is a serious matter in South Africa, why should he withdraw the case of being kicked in the parliament, inside the parliament called Pan-African Parliament?
Okay.
Parliament
okay. All right, Lerotodi.
Right.
You've made the point. You've made the point. Rudzani, you're in Kempton Park. Good morning.
Morning. I see you are taking my call at exactly 10 o'clock, but I'll try to be brief. Cathy, yesterday, some times ago, you interviewed a very irresponsible student who said they're on hunger strike because that one specifically, she said she wanted to do masters, but she can't register because the fees are not paid by NFSAS. I just want to mention to that lady that South African state has already mentioned that the first degree is the one that you need to be looking for work outside there. In fact, it's irresponsible for her to go and sit there in vet, whereas she's supposed to go back to NFSAS to say, pay my fees, I want to continue with my studies. Lastly, if she wants to do the masters with NFSAS funds, that's when I'm finding it to be very, very irresponsible, because we need to release the pressure for the people who want to do the first degree. I used NFSAS to do the first, what we call higher diploma myself. After that, they said no, it was still called NFSAS. After that, they said no, you cannot continue with our funds, go and look for work. Fortunately, I was employed and then they garnished me until they deduct more than what I was supposed to pay them. And then we even donated that money to NFSAS. But for somebody to want to do masters and then PhD with NFSAS, it's very irresponsible. And it's somebody that I'm very worried, because as an academic, you should know that for those who are still coming in, at least if you've got a degree, go out and look for work, and then you can pay for your own masters and PhDs. Thank you very much.
Look, Ruzani, I hear where you're coming from, but I also, have empathized with her position too, because she says a degree on its own is the equivalent of a matric certificate. And you remember, this was yesterday. So many of our listeners agreed with that it's not going to get you through the door, that you now need more. And so her trying to go and find a job at this point in her career or in her, in her life is not an option.
I understand that case, but then maybe let's rather go back to the state's SA to say, do not lie to people that at least the first degree is the one which is making people to get employed, because that is what they are reporting to us. But yes, I also sympathize with her. But Cathy, can you imagine somebody who wants to do the first entry in the university cannot get money because somebody is doing masters? How do you strike the balance, Cathy, on that one?
Yeah, Rudzani, I take your point completely. And that's why the unemployment situation cannot continue being what it is, because this is part of the cycle that it creates.
Yeah,
All right.
it's hard. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, Ruzani, it's time for the latest news.
In our top stories, suggestions regarding SOEs ahead of the finance minister's budget speech, and a tornado damages buildings in Pretoria North. Good morning. Experts have suggested South Africa's state-owned enterprises should be categorized into strategic and non-strategic entities. The suggestion comes ahead of the Finance Minister Ino Godongwana's 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. There are around 700 SOEs at national, provincial and local levels, many of whom are struggling to make a profit. Professor Dilip Karaj says these entities should be privatized and government must remain a shareholder. He also suggests government spending should go towards SOEs such as PRASA that have national benefit.
The fact that we need workers to get from home to work, all of that will be a strategic industry, and we need to fund that industry in a way to ensure that the government plays not a role.
Meanwhile, South Africans have mixed expectations to the budget policy statement. They include some economists who've painted a bleak picture of the country's economic future. The budget is government's most important document which affects the economy and the lives of all South Africans. It is seen as a critical tool for shaping economic policy and determining government's priorities. These ordinary citizens have called on the minister to address the needs of the poor.
It's a big day for those who are very well suited in the bank, because our budgets have always been anti-poor. If you look at them, they've never been addressing any issues of the poor. So it will be more of the same for those who are poor. I really feel sorry, because it's not going to do anything in this budget.
I think the Minister of Finance must stop this thing of budget cut to serious portfolios like national defense, education, and especially health. These are some of the serious portfolios that should be given enough budgets.
A number of buildings and vehicles have been damaged after tornado hit Montana in northern Pretoria last night. Several residential complexes in the area have been left exposed to the rain, especially on the upper floors, as roofs have been badly damaged. No injuries have been reported. The Tshwane Emergency Services spokesperson, Lindsay Mguni, says they've provided the affected residents with temporary accommodation.
Upon arrival, the firefighters found out that there was a significant damage caused by the storm, which uprooted some trees and blew away the corrugated iron roof sheets of the buildings, carports and other structures in the area. The residents had to be evacuated and sheltered temporarily in the neighboring units.
A 39-year-old patient has died at the Prince Mshiyeni Memorial Hospital in Umlazi in southern Durban. This after he ignited a cigarette lighter close to an oxygen tank, which led to a fire yesterday. The KwaZulu-Natal Health Department says hospital staff responded to the incident swiftly, but efforts to resuscitate the patient was unsuccessful. The patient, who had been admitted to the hospital last Friday, succumbed to burn wounds. The department's acting head, Penny Msimango.
On investigation of the cause of the fire, a cigarette lighter was found next to the bed, which indicates that the patient was probably smoking. However, it was also discovered that there is an oxygen cylinder in the same ward because the patient needed oxygen. Whenever you light a fire in the presence of oxygen, that is a very high risk. A fire broke out, the patient sustained severe burns and unfortunately succumbed to his injuries.
And finally, Hamas says it's ready to release all the hostages in the second phase of the ceasefire deal with Israel. But Hamas has rejected Israel's demand for the group's disarmament and removal from Gaza. This as Israel awaits the first handover of the bodies of hostages who died in Gaza. The BBC's Sebastian Usher has the details.
The statement from a Hamas spokesman, Hazem Qasem, has given an outline of how Hamas envisions the second phase of the ceasefire as the first is drawing to an end. He made clear that the offer to release the more than 60 remaining hostages in one go was dependent on reaching agreement with Israel on a complete withdrawal of its forces from Gaza and a permanent end to the war. The Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has said that delayed talks on phase 2 will begin this week and insisted that Israel would accept nothing less than the complete demilitarization of Gaza. The statement from Hamas rejected this demand as unacceptable.
Recapping the top story, experts have suggested South Africa's state-owned enterprises should be categorized into strategic and non-strategic entities. The suggestion comes ahead of the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Are we ready for a real conversation? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
And then, how? SK, where are you going with that stuff?
My dog, I'm going whale watching. New hobby, you see. Finally going out to explore the world. Giri levels, Dwana.
I see the life jacket, but I don't know how an inflatable boat, megaphone, and a fishing rod fits into all of this.
How else am I going to get to the whales, bongs? I need the boat. The megaphone is to do my whale calls, and the fishing rod, it's called ambience. Ambience. If you don't get it, forget about it.
Okay, but SK, you know there aren't any whales here in Germiston Lake.
Ooh, Shem, Mr. Know-it-all. Whales live in the water, and Germiston Lake has water.
Hi, sure, Ntwana, go whale watching in Germiston Lake. Me! I'll tune into Whale with Steve Buckshall, Sundays at 5 p.m. only on S3.
Honey, what are you doing?
I'm stretching for tonight.
I thought you're not dancing at bachelorette parties anymore.
Baby, we need the money to put Johnny through matric, mos.
And what's the police uniform for?
The clients feel safer when I wear it.
No, man, just sell your bucky to We Buy Cars. They give the best prices and they pay you within minutes.
Okay, but can I just go and dance one more time, please? You know how much I love it.
No, the buyer's already on his way here.
Wow, okay.
Strapped for cash? Just sell your vehicle to We Buy Cars. The easiest way to sell your car by far.
You're listening to the National Pulse.
If they don't have approval, what do you then do about it?
There's going to be a lot of, fines that are there as well. You can be arrested for damage to the infrastructure. That damaging the infrastructure of, Gautrain is a very serious. It's actually close to treason because, what if, you would have done a lot of disaster, which in the train derails and everything. So it's quite very serious. Many people that have been arrested, we've taken others that they're actually going to be going into court. And what we even went to do, we've even confiscated the drilling machines from the company.
So Dr. Mqini Twaku is the MMC for Community Safety in the city of Joburg.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
10 after 10 o'clock, welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up within this hour, we're going to be reflecting on, for Citizens Corner, we'll be looking at the impact of budget cuts on the delivery of basic services, and we'll be joined by a number of guests who I think really are experts in their own right when it comes to the contributions to this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to what it is that they'll be able to share with us. But before we get into that, your voice notes from the open line.
Hi, Cathy. Hoping you're well. This is Daniel. Cathy, I think the Kaizer Chief coach here, Nazar Bin, he will have to do the honorable thing. And the honorable thing is just to leave the club. This man, I tell you, he is so useless. Right? They bought him, professional players, right? Every time one is beating, he's always pointing the finger to the official. Nah, he's got to go. He's got to go, Cathy. He's got to go. Thank you.
Good morning, House Cathy, and good morning to your crew. House Cathy, I am living in Taung. I'm having a problem with our chief here, man. We are not getting a right treatment, a good treatment from him. Truly speaking, we are having a serious problem because the man is even causing the trouble, the fights against us, if I can put it in that way, because we have a problem of our farmers' buildings here that must be used by farmers, but he wants other people to use it. But this is the farmers' building. So it is very bad for a man who's supposed to show us the way. He's the one who's creating the problems amongst us. Truly speaking, my sister, it is very bad. It is in Taung, under the chief of Bakapuru. I thank you.
Good morning, Sis Kathy. Regarding what this lady has just talked about, I'm very angry. Nothing in the Northwest Province, particularly in what they call the capital city, is functional. That was given to them or they took from the government of President Mangope. Nothing is functional. The stadium is not functional. Convention center is not functional. Roads are not functional. There are no street lights. The grass is tall. Even in the vicinity of what they are calling legislature where they sit, they inherited a lot of things from Mangope, but they are not looking after these things.
Another thing I want to raise, this SASA card debacle. Government is really abusing our old people, making them go stand in the long queues and turning them away. And they're coming from far. You're coming there and you're making, these people are over 70s, 80s. Come on, guys. You got to simplify this whole system. It's frustrating, eh?
Hi, good morning, Cathy. I don't want to mention my name. Those are the words that I received from my boss after he received the documents that I sent him from the bargaining council after I was dismissed last week, Thursday. He sent me the message that I sent you guys there. So I just need an advice about what to do on a situation like this. So I'm working as a truck driver. So apparently last week, Thursday, I was fired from my duties. And then on Friday last week, I went to bargaining council. Then I sent those documents to my boss. So he sent me that message immediately after getting my documents. Advice, please.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on the Talking Point at Citizens Corner, and in light of the budget that is set to be tabled this afternoon, we thought we'd take a more than people-centric view when it comes to unpacking the budget, especially over the last couple of years, what the cuts in spending have effectively meant for the delivery of services, and what we need to do differently to ensure that the cost or the burden of these cuts is not being borne by the most vulnerable in our society, by the poor in our society. Let me welcome onto the show Michael Sachs. He's adjunct professor of public economy at Wits University. Michael, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to the listeners.
Itumeleng Mohlahlana is Acting Deputy General Secretary for Equal Education. Itumeleng, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy. Thank you for having us this morning.
And also, of course, joining this conversation, Dr. Promise Mthembu, who works on the ground with many NGOs within the health sector. Dr. Mthembu, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners. Thank you for having me today.
All right. Let's begin the conversation, Michael, then perhaps with you. You know, this word austerity, it was thrown around 2022, if I recall correctly, is when you first started to hear it really coming out. 2023, there were more voices that talked of an austerity budget. It's now 2025. It seems that the idea that we are operating off of an austerity budget is no longer just a description, from several sectors of our society. It seems to be a reality. But we've never really gotten an acknowledgement from Treasury that this is in fact an austerity budget. It still remains something that they deny quite vehemently. Speak to me about how our budgeting is taking place and if in fact we are deep in austerity.
Thank you, Cathy. I mean, let me start by saying that personally, I don't like to use the word austerity because, first of all, it has obviously a negative connotation, which may be right or may be wrong. But secondly, it doesn't have a very clear definition, or different people, when they use the term, use different definitions. So, for example, for some people, you may have read in the newspapers today and yesterday that apparently Treasury is considering raising taxes. And for some people, that constitutes austerity, because raising taxes are part of the effort of government to achieve fiscal sustainability. Other people have different definitions of austerity, and so I think whatever we call it, in a sense, it's secondary. What is primary, what is most important, is what is the trajectory we have been on as far as government spending is concerned, and what is the impact of that on service delivery. And so I would use an example from the healthcare sector. So the number of government employees in the healthcare sector relative to the population, in other words, the number of people in society who need to use public healthcare, and in this case that means the population who don't have medical insurance or medical aid, the ratio of healthcare workers employed by government to the population that they serve has been falling for more than 10 years. So we've had a declining number of, if you like, for each healthcare worker, doctor, nurse, or other worker that is employed in the health system, over the last decade or 15 years, have seen the number of people that they need to serve increase substantially. And so one could say, whether that one calls that austerity or not, what it means is that public health services, spending on public health services is not keeping pace. And employment of doctors and nurses and others is not keeping pace with the growth of the population, which means, all other things being equal, that the quality of those services that are being provided is likely to be falling. Now, this process of fiscal consolidation, of containing the headcount growth in the healthcare sector, and I think, I could apply the same logic, of course, to defense or to education or to many other sectors. Criminal justice, the police have seen huge reductions in the size of the police force over the last 10 years by about 20,000 personnel. And education, we've seen rising learner-educator ratios, in other words, rising class sizes. And it's important to be clear that this has been going on for 10 or 15 years. This is not new. What is new is since the COVID pandemic, there has been a real intensification and acceleration of these attempts at containing expenditure. And so you've seen not only the headcounts falling in the public services, but also the salaries that doctors and nurses and others are getting, police officers and teachers, have been cut in real terms every year for the last 5 years. So you've seen an acceleration of a process that's been going on for some time.
And if we are to think of the cumulative effect of that, Michael, you talk about a time frame of 10 to 15 years ago. So by all means, if we're looking at a decade ago, the impact of the reduction in spending would not be felt to the extent that it is being felt today, because we have a bigger population today than we did 10 to 15 years ago. So if you are to bring it home to how you believe that this then has impacted the lives of ordinary South Africans?
Well, first of all, let me say that maybe I'm not the best person to ask that question because, like many South Africans, I tend to not use public services much. Let me say, I mean, one of my children goes to a public school, but that public school is more of a Model C school. Healthcare and even security, I rely on private services to a large extent. And I think the thing to bear in mind is that these private services, private provision of healthcare, private provision of security, private provision of education, all of those sectors over the last 10 or 15 years have been the booming sectors in the South African economy, certainly at least as far as employment is concerned. So private healthcare has, while there's been this constraint on the public services, private healthcare has expanded significantly. And, you know, there's various ways you can look at that. On the one hand, you might say, well, people who can afford private healthcare should go there, and that is easing the burden on the public sector, on the government hospitals. But on the other hand, you might look at it and say, well, anyone who can afford to escape from declining levels of service delivery in the public sector, anyone who has the income that enables them to do that will certainly leave and go to the private sector. And so you have this boom in private sector provision together with but I mean, so having said all that, I would say I can see the consequences of this partly. And I mean, you know, social outcomes are complex. There's never one cause for outcomes. But if you just pick up the papers and you read about the conditions in the courts for people awaiting court justice, if you read about what has been happening to the Defence Force in its deployments, and today there was another article where the Minister of Defence was quoted as saying that really we don't have the parts to sail our ships or fly the airplanes that the Defence Force has. Now, and the Defence Force year after year has really increasingly only able to pay for one thing, and that is salaries. But at the same time, the effectiveness of the Defence Force is declining. And one can apply that same logic to our hospitals, to our schools, and to our criminal justice system.
Itumeleng, let me bring you into the conversation as somebody who is focused on the education sector. I think then you would be able to help us add meat to the foundation that Michael has laid. So, in real terms, this cutback in spending, what has that meant for the provision of quality education? And what are the figures in terms of how much we are spending today on learners than what we were spending perhaps before?
Thank you, Ms. Cathy. So one of the things with equal education that we've been looking at is the fact that the Department of Basic Education used to, in 2015, get the biggest chunk of the budget, which was at about 15.49. But looking at 2024, that budget has gone down by almost 2%, with the spending being only at about 13.69%. And in real terms, this means that more than 6 billion less is being spent on education currently. And what that means is that there is lack of provision for teachers in schools. Yesterday, the Eastern Cape Department of Education was talking about how they had to make a political choice between the provision of teachers and the provision of school infrastructure. And now this issue does not just affect the general population, but it affects the poor and those that are vulnerable, that aren't able to pay themselves out of the situation, that are forced to go to these public schools. For an example, if the budget, due to the budget cuts, we've seen a big chunk of scholar transport provision in the Eastern Cape being cut. What that means is that there are poor Black and female learners that are unsafe on their way to school. We've seen the budgets being cut on infrastructure. What that meant is that the schools that were already being built, that the government had to put a stop on because now the budget to be able to finish those schools isn't there yet. The literacy issue that we've seen continuing in our country. When you look at the literacy crisis, it is only those that are at the bottom of the class that actually don't succeed. When you look at the literacy crisis, only public schools, quintile 1 to quintile 3, and when you speak about quintile 4 to quintile 5, which is the schools that are fee paying, they're able to provide the proper literacy education, and that's because these schools are able to pay teachers, they're able to add on their LTSM, and so that's why as Equal Education we're saying that with the cut in expenditure for social services, we are making the already vulnerable people of our country to be more vulnerable, particularly within the education system.
If we look at the effect again of this reduced spending on education, it seems to me that we are dealing with a problem that is almost brewing beneath the surface, and we're likely to wake up 5 years from now and be in a different kind of crisis when it comes to the impact all of this would have had on our education sector. Would I be correct in that assertion? And maybe you can speak to me as well about what problems this is creating within the education sector more broadly.
Thank you. When we look at particularly the literacy campaign, the literacy crisis in our country, the amount of skills that we are losing out from being able to impart in these learners, we will not have time in the intermediate and high school phase to impart these skills on learners. What that means is that learners, even at grade 11 in high school, are still not able to read for meaning. They're only reading for them to be able to pass. When they get to university, these learners, there will still be no time to make up for the lost time that they've had within the primary school. But also when you look at things like the throughput rate, the amount of learners that start grade 1 together up until grade 12, we see a lot of learners that actually drop out of the system. And we know that a lot of these learners don't just drop out, but they are forced out of the system because of not having access to things like scholar transport, LTSM, and are constantly being excluded from the education system. And what that does is that then there is a pool of young people who are outside the education system and aren't able to benefit. And this has direct impacts then in the economy of our country, in the skills that we're able to produce as a country. Because overall, the other issue that South Africa is faced with in terms of teachers is that about 50% of our teachers, particularly in the more rural provinces that are sitting in the SMT, are likely going to resign in the next 5 years, are likely going to retire in the next 5 years. What that means is the government is then not employing more teachers. These schools are likely going to have less numbers, and we know that has direct impact in the academic performance of our learners. And so this is likely to land us in a very massive skill deficit, but also a disruption in the economy and the ability of this country to produce the needed skills through the education system.
We're going to continue the conversation shortly. It's now 10:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines on SAFM, I'm on Delambana and a very good morning. Kosatu says it is concerned about the possibility of Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announcing increases in personal income tax and VAT in his 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. Police say the bodies of 93 people believed to be illegal miners retrieved from a disused mine in Stelfontein in the northwest last year are yet to be identified, and there is significant flooding in some parts of Mahikeng in the northwest following recent rainfall. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
In the Arena is a docu-series that takes an in-depth look at the life and career of the legendary tennis player Serena Williams, offering a behind-the-scenes glimpse into her journey, both on and off the court. It explores her rise to tennis dominance, challenges, and personal experiences. Do not miss out on a great story of incredible impact. Catch In the Arena on Saturdays at 3 p.m. on SABC3. Alternatively, at 9 p.m. on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 on Saturdays and Thursdays. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Jazz lovers, the wait is over. Africa's grandest gathering returns on the 25th to the 26th of April at the Cape Town International Convention Center. Experience 2 nights of soul-stirring jazz, electrifying collaborations, and over 30 world-class artists across 4 iconic stages. Don't miss this unforgettable musical experience. Get your tickets now at ticketmaster.co.za. Brought to you by Independent Media, proud media partner of the Cape Town International Jazz Festival.
Good times, good memories.
I'm just lighting somebody's fire.
Old school sounding so good. SAFM music with you wherever you go. Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on Citizens Corner, looking ahead to the budget and really focusing then on the decreased spending that we are seeing when it comes to some primary public services, and asking then, what does all of this mean, at least for the experience that you and I will have on the ground when interfacing with some of these services that are offered by the state. Michael Sachs is adjunct professor of public economy at Wits University. Itumeleng Motlhabane is the acting deputy secretary general for equal education, and Dr. Promise Mthembu is lead policy and advocacy at Her Rights Initiative, and they're all on the line. So, Dr. Mthembu, let me give you a chance to come in then and to give a perspective just on the health aspect of things. We heard, Professor Sachs earlier touching and giving the example of the spending on health cumulatively over the past 10 to 15 years. And one thinks about, well, we are in an environment of potentially even less spending, but we've got the NHI lurking somewhere there in the background. But speak to us about what the real impact of that has been.
Thank you, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners as well. I would start about the source of the problem, really, to say, it's multifaceted. So you have systematic, reasons for underspending and the collapse of health services. So there'll be historical, for an example, obviously racial, because when you look at healthcare centers that were in former South Africa, if you put it that way, and those were in homeless, the homelands rather, the quality and the level of resourcing, it's still pretty much the same. The others are getting a bigger share, and the others, are getting, a smaller share, although populations are increasing in former homelands hospitals. My colleague, spoke about the fact that many people actually use public health care services. So you have 83% of the public in South Africa using public healthcare services, although 10% of those will also use private healthcare services, depending on the time of the year, or they have, resources or not. And it's only 17.2% of us that are on medical aid. And other source for me is also structural, in the sense that you have the National Department of Health, then you have the provincial departments of health, and the local departments of health, and these are not connected. So the National Department of Health will come up with policies, but they do not implement, neither do they have power to dictate as to how the provinces and locals should implement, because the two spheres of government, they have their own political mandate and their administration, so in a way, national cannot force them. And I see a problem in that, because if you look at government departments that are national, your treasury, DECO and others, they are more efficient in terms of service delivery and saving on resources. Of course, there are management, issues, hospitals not managing resources as they should. The impact, for an example, it's great. I was listening at your 10 o'clock bulletin, for an example, where you were talking about a patient who burned the whole ward in Prince Msheni. And I was reminded that a few months ago in another hospital in KwaZulu-Natal, Clearwood Hospital, a patient burned herself. She committed suicide in the ward. And what was the reason for that? And I think it's the same with Prince Msheni. It was because of shortage of staff. You remember that shortage of staff, it has been going on for quite some time, more than a decade, as my colleague said, but it increased, the freezing of positions increased from 2019 up until now. They're not hiring nurses, and if they do hire, it will be temporary nurses. Similar situation with doctors, and support staff. And some of these positions are outsourced. I mean, for an example, how do you outsource a porter in a hospital? How do you outsource security, in the hospital? How do you outsource X-ray services? Because these are basic, services. And outsourcing means that the service is not reliable, but it also means it is more expensive to run the service. For an example, if you outsource an X-ray facility, you are renting the X-ray itself, but you're also renting, you're paying for maintenance of this X-ray. So each time it has to be serviced, the hospital has to, pay for it. So the impact are great. So if the X-ray is not working, it means that the screening does not happen. So the diagnosis does not happen. And that basically means that patients are dying without being, diagnosed, and patients are not able to be moved from basic services to tertiary services. There has been many instances. I will name the hospitals, Clearwood Hospitals, Prince Msheni, and RKK Hospital, where the theaters did not have air conditioning, because it's another provider that services the air conditioning. And if there is no conditioning in theaters, it means that that hospital is not performing operations for the whole week. And then you think of corruption that comes with tendering as well. And also for me, tendering disconnect healthcare centers from the community. So there is no psychological contracting, to these, centers, because the bulk of the money is going to tenderpreneurs. Right. As such, the community is not going to be looking after these facilities. So those are some of the impact, Cathy.
Michael, to what end really is the thinking of government when it comes to the budget that it proposes? And, I know that you're not the finance minister, nor are you in his head. But as somebody who is an expert in this field, when you rationalize, the plan, where is it all taking us to? What is the goal that we're after? Because we often hear lots of talk about fiscal consolidation and the need then to manage our spiraling debt in inverted commas. So explain to us in very layman's terms where you think the government is actually going with its planning and how long we're likely to be in the cycle for.
I'll try my best, Cathy, to explain this, because I think it's very important that this austerity, as we call it, as some call it, is not simply a madness. It is an attempt to solve a real problem. And we might not like the solution that we see, but it's important to understand why it is being done, because there is a real problem. And I would describe the problem like this. Each year, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, the revenue government collects in taxes is insufficient to pay for all of the services that government provides. And so government borrows. And who does it borrow from? It's not really from banks. It's from capital markets. It's from people with spare cash that can buy a government bond and lend some money to the government. And when they lend that money to the government now has to pay them interest for the next 10 years. The most common bond is a 10-year bond. So you lend the government money for 10 years. And between now, 2025, and 2035, when the government is going to pay you back, the government every year is going to pay you an amount of money in interest. And the more we borrow, the more those interest payments rise. And of course, for every rand that the government collects in taxes, that rand will finance expenditure, and part of that expenditure is on healthcare and schools and criminal justice. But it also has to pay for those debt service costs. And those debt service costs have been the fastest rising component of government expenditure also over the same period. So what happened in about 15 years ago.
Michael, I'm not sure what's happening with that line. We seem to have lost you there. The producers will try and get you back up so that
government collects comes from that growth rate of the whole economy.
Michael,
it also began to decelerate.
Yeah, look, we lost you at least for the last 20 seconds there. The connection broke. Yeah. So if you can go back to the interest on debt that has been, increasing rapidly, and the need for government then to address that and try and contain that.
So government has to budget for that interest on debt, and then it depends on how much are you being charged in interest by markets, essentially. But also the other key issue is the rate of economic growth, because it's the economic growth. When the economy grows and more people are employed and more salaries are paid, then of course government gets more taxation, and so the slowdown in growth and the increase in interest rates, which happened at the same time, has put South Africa in a position where it is facing these financial constraints. So there is a strong, and quite frankly, this has to be responded to. So government it can't just ignore that problem, because the more you ignore that problem, the more your interest rates are going to go up. And as people start worrying that maybe you won't pay your debt back one day, it begins to impact on your rate of growth. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And we are in that vicious cycle now. And so definitely there needs to be an answer. I have been criticizing government, I suppose, and some others, for saying the problem with the answer that government is proposing, there are two problems. The first is that it has all been focused on the expenditure side of the budget. In other words, there have been no attempts to raise additional tax revenue. And this is, we can argue about the economics of that, but from the equity point of view, this means that you are placing the full burden of this problem on the poorest. or in society, and you are not sharing that burden with the affluent, who are those who pay taxes in the main. That's the first problem. The second problem has been what I've called a lawnmower approach to cutting spending. So the first problem is that we are only cutting spending, or the full burden is going on spending. Then when we come to spending, we adopt this lawnmower approach where you cut everything in the garden with the lawnmower, whether it's a flower or a blade of grass or something else. You don't distinguish. Everybody gets cut together. And the reason Treasury is doing that, or Minister of Finance is doing that, is because, in a sense, that is politically the only course of action open to him. Because if you are to now say, no, let's pick this flower or pick those weeds or those particular problematic areas of spending, and you focus the consolidation of those in order to protect the frontline services, that's a preferable approach, but it's politically much more difficult, because now your targets will mobilize against you. Whereas when you share the burden equally amongst everybody, in some sense, it's easier to pass. So let me stop there, Cathy.
Thanks for that, Michael. Itumeleng, an explanation like that sort of tries to unpack at least, what the current situation is. As somebody who's sitting in civil society, any of those reasons really, do they sound justified in your view? What else can be done in your view to deal with this problem?
As equal education, we do acknowledge that South Africa swimming in debt is a big problem. But what we're currently arguing is that why is it that the alternative of government is the one that is directly felt by the poor? So the only increases that we've seen in the past is increases of VAT and the budget cuts. But why is government not taxing the rich and implementing a wealth tax so that those that have in this country also feel the consequences of this country being in debt the same way that the poor are feeling? For an example, we view that National Treasury needs to also take a political position in terms of who they shield and who they protect, because currently it seems like the people of this country that are using public services are the ones that they've deprioritized, and also the ones that are shielded are the ones that have access to private services, and that is not how it should be. And so our view of options like the wealth tax is that there must be some form of equity in terms of who gets to feel the consequences of the austerity and the budget cuts. We view the Treasury as a super ministry because it enables all other ministries to be able to do their work. And so if then their focus is deprioritization of the public, then it's likely going to follow, like we've seen with the Ministry of Education. While the minister has said that by the end of March, she would have finished with plain things, but now she's come back to say because of budget issues, she will not be able to do that. And so these are the kinds of consequences that we see when National Treasury doesn't take a political stand to protect our people.
Dr. Promise, let me give you a chance to come in before I take some of our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Cathy, and my co-panelist. I'm not sure whether applying sort of neoliberal economics in health financing is helping us really. And I align with what the sister is saying, that we kind of have to discipline capital as well, so that we are able to create some equity and also finance our healthcare services. Let me start with medication, for an example, that because of population that we cannot, population influx that we cannot regulate, we have shortage of medication. And one of the reasons for that is that hospital CEOs are saying, I cannot budget. I budget, but by June, my budget for medication is gone because I don't know how many people I am servicing. I work on the basis of what the census is telling me, and this is not what I'm getting in my hospital, right? And also, I remember, Cathy, that during state capture, there was an organization of medical professionals, that were at pains for Zondo to, investigate the capture that is in the healthcare services, because with purchasing of medication, for an example, there are monopolies who have long-term, contracts. And there was, I don't know what the situation is now, but there was the office of USID in the national department, very close to the office of the DG, and the purpose was to make sure that procurement, goes, to the US, and that there's, budget US drug companies, and that there are budgets, that are, assigned to that. So let's find other ways of purchasing medication that are going to be, efficient, right?
Okay.
And then also, why, Cathy, is the state paying medical aid through medical aids, allowances that they are paying for public, servants? Why don't you direct those, resources to public healthcare services so that we all public servants access the services, and there's a middle class, effect in the efficiency of services. They have the voice, political clout, so services that are utilized by middle class tend to be, better. Wealth tax, definitely, starting with the surpluses of medical aids. Those should be, invested back, to the healthcare services. And why are private hospitals not taking, some of the patients as, social responsibility, or, basically saying we're using public health resources, and if health is a right, we'll also take, some of the burdens and use our profits to cover, that as well. And with regards to NHI, I don't think it's going to be a solution if we approach it from the neoliberal, perspective. And I don't think it's productive for us to implement it holistically. Like I would take ring fence, certain services, and ring fence them under NHI and sort of do it gradually,
All right.
so that I experiment as I implement. Yeah, so those would be, my contributions. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for that, Dr. Mthembu. Brian, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Good morning to you and your guests, Cathy. Actually, your previous speaker just preempted mainly what I wanted to say, but aside from that, look, the Zondo Commission cost us 1.5 billion, taxpayers, 1.5 billion rand. There's no consequences. Your previous speaker mentioned hospitals, healthcare. 500,000 rand was wasted on skinny jeans at, I think it was Deepsword Hospital. The list goes on and on. Ghost workers, you name it. You can go on for days. Now, aside from the fact that the global capitalist system will never deliver, it only delivers misery. We can see what's happening throughout the world today. You see, our failure to solve our problems, social problems, is based on is rooted in our failure to acknowledge the cause, which is the capitalist system. But second to that, I would say, no consequences. As long as this government doesn't take action against those looters and gangsters that looted the taxpayers' money in all spheres of our society, nothing will improve.
Thanks for that contribution, Brian. Let me bring in the voices of more of our listeners.
Morning, my sister, all the way from Cape Town here. Interesting, this topic about this spending, but nobody comes and says we need to curb this guy's spending, because this guy is catching on nonsense. Nobody's coming, you don't hear anything, but nobody's being dismissed. We only hear we need to curb spending. We don't curb the person that is mismanaging these funds. Fire all of it. You ask the question, what needs to be done? You fire all of these ministers, all of these EDs, and all of these guys that can't do the business. We can't be continuing like this. We do a Trump on these people. Come on, man, South Africa.
Good morning, SAFM. Good morning, Cathy. I'm listening to one of your speakers mentioning that the state needs to decide between teachers and infrastructure. And I feel that infrastructure is a more long-term issue, and where teachers are short-term issue. It's an issue that needs looking at right now. And I want to remind our callers that in the Western Cape last year during the national debates, but it was a local debate for all the Western Cape candidates and parties, Alan Winde openly mentioned in that debate that and very proudly mentioned that he removed money from education and funneled it towards security. And a week or a month later, there's a whole fleet of new law enforcement buckies and vehicles. So yes, priorities need to be straight.
Good morning, Cathy. My concern is the 70 billion rand that we borrowed from the IMF and the conditions that come with that loan, which are things like austerity measures or wage cuts and increasing VAT. So I wonder how much of that 70 billion rand that we borrowed have we paid back. And I understand, I think it's for 5 years that we must pay back that money. Perhaps this year or next year, that loan must be paid back. So out of that money we are paying back, I think this is why some of these austerity measures have been applied. Thanks, Lionel Whitbank.
All right. Thank you all for your contributions. Look, Prof, as we get ready to wrap up, I mean, one of the questions on my mind really to add to our listeners is how much more pain can the South African public take, especially when we look at the impact of that on our social, on the social aspect of our society.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I mean some of your listeners have mentioned corruption and inefficiency and various other problems that clearly are there in government. But the challenge with addressing that is that, you know, from a budget point of view, there's no budget that is set aside for those items. If we had a budget for corruption, we could simply cut it and then we would have money, but there's nothing like that. So you have to catch the corrupt person and then prosecute him and then get his money back. And you can't budget on the basis. If it happens, good, it will ease the budget pressures. But while it is not happening, if we stay where we are now, it's not going to help us to say that that will create money. So the question is, the services are eroding. And this is having social and economic consequences because let's remember, this is not, that's why I don't really like the term social wage, because something like education is fundamentally important to our long-term economic growth. So if we are eroding our basic education system, that's going to have an impact later on. Whether it's, so economically and socially, it clearly, problems begin to mount. And then the question is, politically, does it have consequences? And one might say that already there have been some political consequences. And the frustration of the electorate has been reflected in various ways by not participating in elections and by voting for different parties and etc. So I don't, if growth, the answer really is growth, is economic growth in South Africa. And if we're unable to accelerate economic growth, unfortunately, we are likely to remain caught in this vicious cycle.
Itumeleng, what is the cost if nothing changes, everything stays the same? Very briefly.
As equal education, we're saying that this cannot go on because obviously it means that in the future we're going to have issues in our education system, but in our economic system, but also we're going to have a skills deficit. And as a country, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid actually putting out policies that we will not meet. For an example, now we have BELA that needs to be met with money because if you're putting grade R into the basic education system, you will need to fund that. So we cannot continue to have a government that legislates policies that will not be prioritized through funds.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there, completely out of time. Apologies, Dr. Mthembu. I didn't get a chance to give you a final word. Thank you to all of our guests for being part of this conversation. It is now 11 o'clock, time for the latest news update.
Thank you, Cathy. Top stories at 11. COSATU speaks on budget policy statement expectations in some parts of Northwest are flooded. For SAFM News, I am Ondalambana and a very good morning. COSATU says it is concerned about the possibility of Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announcing increases in personal income tax and VAT in his 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. The Labour Federation says government should come up with other ways of raising funds to boost the fiscus. South Africa's fiscal policy from 1994 was generally aimed at lowering tax rates. However, the country's current huge debt repayment takes up much of the fiscus. COSATU's liaison officer in Parliament is Matthew Parks.
There's been huge rises in transport, electricity, municipal tariffs, and workers just are not coping. They spend most of their salaries on electricity and getting to work. We think if there's this pressure on the state, there's other ways to raise money. Number one, we would want to give the South African Revenue Service at least an extra 3 billion rand to boost tax compliance by 60 billion rand. We think it would be absolutely immoral to increase the VAT. Workers just can't cope, and when you increase the VAT, all you do, besides plunging workers into debt, you take money out of the economy.
Meanwhile, some experts have suggested that South Africa's state-owned enterprises should be put in categories of strategic and non-strategic entities. The suggestion comes ahead of the budget policy statement. There are around 700 SOEs at national, provincial and local levels, many of which are struggling to make a profit. Professor Taleb Garash says these entities should be privatized and government must remain a shareholder. Professor Garash also suggests that government spending should go towards SOEs such as PRASA that have national benefit.
When you look at the country and the fact that we need workers to get from home to work and all of that will be a strategic industry. And we need to fund that industry in a way to ensure that the government plays part of a role.
Children living at the Walter Sisulu Child and Youth Care Centre in Worzegesig in southern Johannesburg are calling the Finance Minister to increase funding for institutions that care for vulnerable youth. They say the facility is severely under-resourced, with caregivers at times dipping into their own pockets to provide some of their basic needs. These children say their situation is desperate.
Basic needs that would need is resources, the lack of resources. Many resources are provided by our care workers. So I'd like the Enoch Godongwana to add money so that we get new TVs, clothing and food that we eat.
So what I'd like to hear from the Finance Minister is that they should add to resources like Sipo has mentioned, ma'am. As we are heading to winter, we are going to need more blankets, you understand, ma'am, because we need to be warm for the night, you understand.
Police say the bodies of 93 people believed to be illegal miners retrieved from a disused mine in Selfontein in the northwest last year are yet to be identified. This comes after post-mortems conducted on all the bodies revealed that some died of starvation and others lung infections. In August last year, police descended on the mine through Operation Valumkodi, cutting off the illegal miners' food and water supply. Officers also arrested those who surfaced from underground. Since the inception of the operation in December 2023, more than 18,000 suspects have been arrested. Provincial police spokesperson is Sabata Mokhabone.
9 brought to the surface through a probe by committee volunteers between December 2024 and 9 January 2025. 78 brought to the surface between Monday the 13th and Wednesday the 15th of January during the mine rescue operation. 5 suspected illegal miners who died while admitted to hospital between Monday the 20th of January and Wednesday the 12th of February 2025. Of this number, 4 resurfaced at Beffelsfontein Shaft number 11 and 1 at Margaret Shaft.
There is significant flooding in some parts of Mahikeng in the northwest following recent rainfall. Some residents speaking of rising water levels, making it difficult for them to take their children to school safely. Recapping the top story, COSATU says it is concerned about the possibility of Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announcing increases in personal income tax and VAT in his 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. I am Ondalambana for SAFM News, headlines at 11:30.
SAFM. Prime time all day long. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, Katie. My DMK, the Chiefs, is very disappointing. It's like we, the fans, are more serious than the players, you know? Players are not serious at all. They are not taking us serious. They are not ambitious. They're just playing for vibes, you know? I mean, how do you take a beating of 4-1? This team is not serious. I think it's time that we put fans on the field because it seems like they are more serious than the players.
Good morning, this is Cathy. Lazarus in the Free State. Yeah, just an advice is Cathy on the meter reading. Sometimes municipality does appoint third parties or service providers to take meter readings. Now, these guys, when they are lazy or when they don't want to do their work, they simply use the previous records and just submit so that they can get their payment from the municipality. So the other guy from Everton or from Mid Valley is correct. You must always make sure that you take those meter readings by yourself and submit them to the municipality. Or even if you have a complaint, you can actually go to the municipality, even if that company is a third party. That means those guys are not doing their job. That SOS. Lazarus in the Free State. Thank you, Cathy.
Morning, Cathy, and morning to your listeners. I'd like to contribute on this thing of alcohol and its prices being increased. I think they did well on that because, we pay a lot for alcohol. I'm also a member of Alcohol Stockfed in the village, and we contribute like 2,000 rand each member a month. Mind you, I don't even drink alcohol, but you end up, if you don't drink alcohol, you end up having like a lot of alcohol at home sitting there, nobody to drink it. So, it's something with men and alcohol. I don't know what's the bond, but there's something that connects the two. My wife knows nothing about it because I know if I were to tell her, she wouldn't approve. She wouldn't. So everything is hidden. Everything is hidden.
Good morning, Kathy and the SFM listeners. As a Kaizer Chiefs fan, yesterday I was watching how our team played against SuperSport. Then I could tell that the whole structure of the team is not ready. As for now, we are as good as a team that will always fight for top 8 because they are not showing enough patience, they are not showing enough hunger and eager that represents a big team. They are not representing the brand of Kaizer Chiefs. We need to develop them more, but as for now, the next 2 years as Kaizer Chiefs, we are not ready for anything. Brandma by Proteagland. Thanks for the great show, Kathy.
Sis Cathy, hi, are you well? This is JCK Kaunda from Sina. Sis Cathy, I would like to talk about budget speech 2025 under GNU. Politicians should always 24/7 remember their mandate. Their mandate is to represent us as citizens, to represent us, the pro-poor. The budget should talk to the pro-poor, and they should reduce tax. Food is too expensive, petrol is too expensive, tires are too expensive. Everything is too expensive under our government. What is wrong? Who are you representing? Let me rest my case for now. Jesse K. Kaunda from Sina.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, thank you for your contributions to the show. It is 10 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of the Talking Point. Yeah, one of our listeners there talking about being part of an alcohol stockfile as well, but his wife doesn't know about it. He pays even more than Sello, and yet he says he doesn't drink. So where does he take his share? of the alcohol at the end of the year? What does he do with it? Or he just takes it home and he says, no, this is groceries. It's part of the groceries I bought. 2,000 rand. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's move right along then to our final conversation of the day. We're going to be looking at the unemployment numbers and then really saying, well, what is it that unions, the role that unions need to be playing in the country in this moment when it comes to dealing with these high unemployment numbers. Joining us on the line today is Zanele Sabela, Congress of the South African Trade Union spokesperson. Zanele, good morning to you. Thanks for your time.
Hello, Cathy. Thank you so much for having us.
Newton Masuku is the acting spokesperson for SAFTU. Newton, good morning.
Good morning and thanks for having us.
And Rifta Ajam is the General Secretary of FEDUSA. Rifta, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy, and thank you once again for the opportunity, and good morning to the listeners.
So when we look at just some of the figures that have been released this week, the quarterly labor force survey showing that unemployment is now at 31.9%, a marginal decline, really, yes, it's a decline nonetheless, but it's really negligible in the greater scheme of things when it comes to the overall unemployment rate in the country. And one of the questions that we need to be asking is, what exactly exists within the labor market in as far as opportunities and skills to ensure that we don't have a situation where young people today are going into high schools, into institutions of higher learning. They're taking streams of subjects that are simply not speaking to the needs in as far as the economy is concerned. So, Zanele, your view as COSATU number one on the state of unemployment, but also what is it that you as a union are doing about this problem?
So, Cathy, you just said there's been a marginal decrease in the unemployment rate. As COSATU, and I think generally as Labour, what we do is we don't look at the official unemployment rate. We actually look at the expanded unemployment rate, which is sitting at 41.9%, which is exactly what it was in the third quarter of 2024. So when you look at that, it includes people who have looked for work, haven't found it, and are now just discouraged and just sitting, but then it still means they are unemployed. And there hasn't been a change there. It's still exactly at 41.9%. And so obviously that is very devastating. It is this economy that hasn't grown, that isn't growing, and it's just stuck at a growth rate of 1%. And so where we are sitting, today being budget day, we are urging the Minister of Finance to actually take a bold, progressive stance towards this upcoming budget and abandon the austerity measures that they have been, for the very longest time, have been implementing. And that includes actually freezing vacancies within the public sector, not expending money to where it should be going. We're talking about cutting teachers now. We all know about the Western Cape that, has cut about, that is planning to cut about 2,500 teachers. There's rumors that in KZN it will be even more devastating at about 19,000 if nothing is changed and nothing is done. So it's a very scary situation. And also there are, like you say, what should be done. There are places when you speak about young people, government has these public employment programs. The one is the presidential stimulus program, which the budget for which has been cut. Many billions have been cut from it. And so it begs the question. I mean, we know that we need to employ more and more people. So programs like that shouldn't be cut. We all had a very scary time in January when we were told that people who are 55 years and older in the community works program will be cut, like 67,000 people. And so somehow we had meetings with the Minister of COPTA, and that was stayed until the end of this current financial year, until March. And so those particular programs, especially, they need to be looked at and be changed around so that people, when they get into those programs, they actually gain the skills that they need to make sure that the next job that they get will be a decent job that will put food on the table and have people actually having a living wage and being able to sustain themselves. And so I think that's what one of the things that has been missing, because when people get into those programs, they hang on for dear life. It's the only lifeline, and they don't want to be doing anything else. And then what that means is then they are very dependent on it. And if what happened in end of December when that announcement was made, then it's very devastating for the person and their family, because their only lifeline to making a living has now been cut. So that's one of the things that we are suggesting that should be looked at.
Newton, do you think that unions have provided alternatives and credible alternatives that the government can be following to what is happening right now, whether it's in the terms of the budget, whether it's in how to ensure that we're actually able to increase our employment numbers?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, for years we have been, urging the change in the macroeconomic trajectory of the country, the monetary policy, fiscal policy, but also industrial policy. We have put concrete proposals on the table. For instance, we have argued for that inflation targeting is a serious problem, as it throttles the productive economy, but also it shrinks the market, because, as you know, capitalism is a system that is based on market presuppose demand presuppose a buyer backed by a purchasing power. Now, if you raise interest rates, you are making difficult not only for the ordinary consumer to buy goods and services, because a huge chunk of that money goes to servicing debt, but also you make it difficult for small and medium businesses to be able to service their debt, and therefore they go bankrupt and all of that. So we have pointed that out. But also we have argued that you can't have a fiscal policy, especially in an economy such as this one, where the private sector has been reluctant to invest. In fact, they have gone on an investment stride. You can't have an economy where a state itself continues to cut budgets. Because, as I have said, capitalism is about sales. When the state insists that each tool wants to have budget surpluses, it means that it wants to remove money from the economy. It doesn't want to spend on enough doctors, enough nurses, enough teachers, and so on and so forth. And as it does that, it shrinks the market, it shrinks demand, and therefore it shrinks buyers backed with purchasing power. As such, you plunge into recession, if not an outright depression. You have an industrial policy similar that is predicated on the export of raw material. It's a colonial structure of economy that is based on the export of raw materials, platinum, gold, and so forth. We do not beneficiate here at home. In other words, we are exporting jobs that would otherwise be, we are exporting minerals that would otherwise be through value addition, would otherwise be creating jobs. So we have made many concrete proposals. Unfortunately, the government is tone deaf, and it will be demonstrated even later today when the minister comes to give his budget. He will slash and burn precisely in opposition to the views we have put on the table.
The reality is that the situation that we are in is one that is becoming harder and harder for ordinary South Africans. And yes, on the one hand, we can lament the cuts in spending, but on the other, there's a lot to be said about even where there are jobs, the quality of services within the public sector, those have been declining overall. But it's not always just due to the lack of capacitation or resources. It also has to do with the fact that, unfortunately, people are not actually bringing their best to the jobs that they have in the public service in some instances. Newton?
Yes, okay. Yeah, well, it's partly true, but our contention is that public servants are overworked and public services are understaffed. and they are underpaid as well. So, I mean, the idea that you can have teachers, for instance, being motivated in overcrowded classrooms and they are understaffed, nurses with nurse-to-patient ratio that are just unworkable, doctor-to-patient ratio that are unworkable, is to place an unrealistic burden on the public servant really. I mean, in fact, even despite the fact that they are overworked and understaffed, they produced relatively impressive metric results. So our contention is that for as long as you do not resolve the understaffing, as long as you do not expand the headcount of the public service, we are going to continue to see these problems, and the working class will continue to be the one that bears the brunt of this budget cut. So we insist that for as long as the budgets are being cut, we are going to have those problems precisely because, one, we are going to have understaffing, but secondly, just teacher morale, nurse morale, doctor's morale is going to decline precisely because of the dire circumstances under which they work. So that's our position.
We're going to continue our conversation in a moment, and then we'll also hear from the FEDUSA General Secretary.
The Chili Boys have a top-class game plan to relocate from the bottom half, but Babina Noko prefer a position in the top 5. This is the Betway Premiership. United battles it out with United. Witness Mzansi's beautiful game. Chipa United FC versus Sikukune United FC. This Saturday, 22 February at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and at 3:30 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at the unemployment numbers, but specifically asking then the unions, what is their contribution to this problem that we're facing in the country? What are some of the solutions that they would offer up in terms of dealing with the high unemployment numbers? Rifda Ajam is the General Secretary for FEDUSA. Rifda, do you want to weigh into this conversation before we take it further?
Absolutely. Cathy, let me just expand on one of the elements that has been outlined by my comrade that is also on the line. When we talk about the public service, we have to understand, number one, that South Africa is a developmental state. We have a national development plan equally that guides the processes in terms of one of the policy ambitions over and above the Constitution, which speaks about many of the elements that have been captured in that conversation. But let me give you some of the statistics that will allow the listeners to have just a little bit of a better insight as to why we are continuing to amplify the discussion. And please don't misunderstand the fact that we are ranting. We are representing workers whose livelihoods are dependent on the elements that we unpack here. So there's always been this myth that the public service is bloated. And if we go back to 1994, just as one of the key points here, we had about 1 million public servants for, at the time, 34 million South African citizens. Today, 2025, we are 1.2 million public servants for just close to 68 million South African citizens. And to compound the problem, we are sitting with these are pressures in the system that we have to take cognizance of, with the reality that with these unfilled vacancies, it means that we are not delivering the services to South African citizens and the poor and the marginalized who are dependent on these public services in particular. We look at the teachers at this stage, which is also a point that has been identified. By cutting something like 2,500 teachers in one province alone will only exacerbate the aspects of overcrowding. pressures on the system, and once again, we are failing the poor and the marginalized in this instance. We cannot continue to advance this debate because we are only going to be seeing a brain drain of skilled public servants, because we have to be satisfied with substandard wage increases, which means that you are going to have disgruntled citizens. We continuously appeal to our members to try and step up to the occasion, and many of them are in essence trying to fund vital services out of their own pockets. I make the example of the Fiducia president, who is working in Limpopo, in Zanini in particular, at one of the institutions called Medingen Clinic. How do we bring value and meaning to those who cannot access services when we are continuing to advance austerity measures at the expense of the poor? We got to look at areas that can be tightened. We got to look at corruption. We've got to look at maladministration and a plethora of other issues over and above the fact that Fiducia has continuously called for an audit and a head count within the public service to see where those ghost workers are being identified to advance on the system. But to continuously say that we are going to be cutting, we are going to be consolidating, is in essence just an injustice to those who are unable to access quality and affordable services. It cannot be this disproportionate burden on the working class continuously.
The challenge is that when it comes to some of the wastage and the mismanagement that we see, with even whatever has been provided for in the budget, is that is, mismanagement that is taking place at the hands of public service workers, whether they are at the very top of the food chain, those that influence the system are still very much a part of the system. And I'm not hearing from the unions how that particular aspect of things is going to be dealt with. Because if you are given X amount and there's no commitment for any more, that means that there has to be the best possible spending and management of that. And yet we're not seeing that. Zanele?
Okay. So when you talk about that, when you talk about, wastage, I think that the good example to look at would be SARS. SARS has proven that any government department, if you put in competent management, you get rid of the corrupt elements, you invest in the systems and the infrastructure that is needed, then that department will actually be productive and produce the goods that need to be produced. So SARS has gone up in terms of tax compliance. They've gone up from 64% to 67%. And so we would like a situation where SARS now goes over 70%, and that will take some money. Will take government investing some more money into SARS, because the minute SARS is given a bit more money, then if we go to that 70% compliance, we're looking at putting into government coffers about 60 billion rands more. And so that is important to do. When you say that there's wastage, there needs to be competent management. The days of actually when somebody is not doing their job, you then hire around them, but you don't take them through what the Labor Relations Act actually provides for, which is you sit with the person, you talk about it, you provide them with training, you make sure that they come up to speed. So there is also a reluctance in terms of top management to manage, and that's what managers do. You must make sure that you get the best out of your people, and those things need to be done. And so in terms of that, that's what we are advocating for. The SARS has shown you that it can be done, and now we're seeing Eskom is now following through also needs to be given more money. More money needs to go to Transnet, because if Transnet is working appropriately, then it boosts mining, agriculture, and manufacturing, and those sectors are actually jobs rich, and they will provide this economy with the thousands and thousands of jobs that are needed. And so it is just that. It is just that the people that are in charge must manage. People that are corrupt must be dealt with, definitely must be dealt with and shown the door. Done obviously in the appropriate way. We can't be advocating for a situation where people are just marched out the door. But it must be the things that need to be done, managers must manage.
Okay, we're going to continue the conversation shortly. It's 11:30.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines, the economic freedom fighters firmly pledges to oppose any tax hikes targeting the ordinary citizens and low-income earners. Meanwhile, COSATU also expressed concern that Godongwana would announce increases in personal income tax and VAT in his 2025 budget policy statement in Cape Town this afternoon. And the American Special Envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, is in Kiev for talks with top officials a day after Ukraine was excluded from Riyadh meeting between the US and Russia. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
S3 and Lorna Maseko are adding flavor to your Wednesday evenings. Lorna invites you on a journey of discovering new ways of transforming South African pantry staples into delectable and budget-friendly meals. From reimagining traditional South African dishes to infusing global inspirations, Lorna's inventive recipes and seasoned cooking tips inspire creativity and will empower viewers to navigate the kitchen with savvy resourcefulness. Tune into Lorna's Pantry, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
Borussia Dortmund and FC Union Berlin are both searching for a decent position in the top half. They have a big battle for maximum points. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch Borussia Dortmund FC versus FC Union Berlin on Saturday, 22 February at 7:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point, the final hour of the show, and we're getting the perspective then of the unions when it comes to the unemployment numbers in the country and asking, well, what role are they playing? What ideas are they putting on the table to help deal with this big problem that we're facing as a society? We're joined by COSATU, SAFTU and FEDUSA representatives. Newton, Zanele says those that are corrupt in the public service, well, action must be taken against them. Those who are in leadership positions must manage and do what they've been put in those positions for. But the reality is that we don't see any of that happening. We don't.
Indeed, but we have, as Sanela has said, we have, as staff, we have called for the prosecution of those who are found to be in the wrong, in the maladministration and mismanagement, and indeed corruption of state funds. Because this has dire implications for the working class who rely heavily on the services that should have otherwise been rendered to them. So indeed, we agree that there's been a slow pace in prosecuting those who are found to be in the wrong, and we have lamented this over the years. But the levers of state power are in the hands of those who are in power, the government itself. Trade unions do not have the means to prosecute. At best, it can just report to the public protector and all of that, and we have done that a number of times. But indeed, we agree that those who are found to be in the wrong should be prosecuted, and the proper measures should be put in place.
I'm still not getting a sense, Newton, of the ideas that unions have when it comes to solving some of these problems that we have within the context that we find ourselves in. So I hear you making an argument, right, about, a neoliberal, economic framework and how that is the fundamental problem. The reality is that it doesn't look like there's going to be a shift from that anytime soon. So that means that whatever solutions that we need to come up with have to also work for the context within we find ourselves.
Well, then that would not be attainable. It's a contradiction in terms. You can't develop an economy within the framework of neoliberalism. And in fact, as the GS of Fedusa pointed out, this government claims, at least on paper, to be a developmental state. And a developmental state, by definition, is at the center of economic development, which means it's contradictory it's contradictory to budget cuts and all of that. It must be at the center of development. So we are saying that's the reason why the proposals we are putting forward are outside of the neoliberal framework, because precisely at the core of our problem, it is this very neoliberalism, which in fact was adopted in 1996 when the ANC adopted GEAR. And indeed, it is going to be intensified in our view with the GNU, because it points out in its statement of intent that, amongst other things, at the core is to adopt what they call fiscal discipline. So we are saying it's undoable. There's no room to maneuver within neoliberalism. In fact, in the history of economic thought, no country has ever developed within the framework of neoliberalism. All countries, including Southeast Asian countries, the Asian tigers, and so on, have developed with the state at the center, directing the content, the form of economic development in society. So there's no way we can discuss this question without pointing a finger directly at the neoliberal macroeconomic framework.
But then where does that leave us, Newton?
Well, it leaves the working class to organize itself and push back. The streets are where this question is going to be settled. I mean, we know that in the question, the force of argument thus far has not worked. We have discussed with the government, we have advanced memorandums, we have said this, that, and the other. So it means, therefore, the force of argument does not work. So we have to invoke the argument of force. The working class has to return to its former glory, where it can take you to the streets en masse to put pressure on the government to invoke policies that will be to its own benefit. There's no any other one.
Rifta, when it comes to the pushback of unions, it does seem that you've been, lack of a better phrase, outmaneuvered in many respects, that most of what unions now spend their time doing is responding to government policy, responding to what they don't like. That voice that workers used to have, perhaps even when it comes to the formulation of policy, seems to have been largely diminished.
Cathy, I want to respectfully disagree with you, my sister. And
please go ahead.
This is a myth and a fallacy that must be killed, for lack of a better word. I want to draw your attention to COVID-19 at the heart of the pandemic, where there was injustice, there was hardship, and there was oppression in every single aspect of what the pandemic had brought about, and it laid bare the inadequacies in the systems and how disproportionately the working class and the poor had been on a back foot in terms of what should have been, but what was not. So when I talk about co-creating solutions, not just with business, but with every element in society, we must step up to the occasion. Because, Cathy, if it was not for the trade unions, how did we then bring to the fore the fact that there was an absolute lack of control, of monitoring and compliance in terms of the unemployment insurance fund? Why do we see transgressions upon transgressions, and workers are left on a back foot. Number one, deductions are made from payroll, but it is not paid over to the fund. If the unions and the federations had not intervened, we would not have seen the COVID tiers being unlocked. That's number one. Number two, we have just dealt with the issue on the two-part retirement system, speaking to the heart of emergencies, speaking to the heart of the plight of the working class who are literally living from paycheck to paycheck. And in the context of that conversation, Cathy, contributions for pension funds are being deducted but are not paid over. The municipalities have been identified as being one of the worst transgressors as well. So why is it that workers are on a back foot, yet we are saying that the unions are worthless? If we had not intervened, these anomalies would not have been brought to the fore. So you cannot say that without undue correction and justification of the facts that are on hand. So we can't continue with this conversation that unions and federations are worthless. That's the one thing I want to put into the conversation. We have been at the forefront within the NEDLAC realm at the same time of drawing up policies to assist government in advancing by bringing about a little bit of respite. But unfortunately, we can craft beautiful policies, but if government fails to properly implement those policies that have deliberate and direct intent in the immediate, short-term and long-term, then how do we continue to say it's the unions? But I reiterate, we are all about co-creating solutions because we have all been impacted by many crises. Many have labeled them as polycrises that we are facing. But unless we are true to what is being said, we are always going to struggle and stumble.
Look, I don't think that anybody said unions were worthless. The point that I made was that there is absolutely a diminished voice of labor in this country. And yes, you can talk about the two-pot system and its implementation as a success. But if we're looking at real terms, what it means for workers to be withdrawing from their pensions during the course of their careers, that in the long run does not benefit workers. And so it comes off the back of a failure to actually convince the state to implement wage increases that are consistent with inflation, and again comes back to some of the core issues that we're facing economically. And I think that's maybe the point that I'm making. It's that as things stand, it seems that the hands of unions are also tied.
Not at all. Let me clarify once again. Number one, the fact that workers have been accessing their pension and provident funds highlights the dire plight of the situation in South Africa. What person goes to access your pension fund if you know that that is there for you during your twilight years when you are in need of it the most, when you are at retirement? Number two, when we take a look at who the biggest winner was in terms of this conversation where workers are once again accessing out of pure emergency, it is government. There was a taxation process that had been applied to this, which ultimately means for every application that was done, and if we quantify that, how then does it say that we are not assisting in any such way? So we've got to be careful on how we apply this, because ultimately within the negotiations at NEDLAC, this was as a result of a catalyst, because what we have been seeing due to that hardships that were there. So Cathy, if I may indulge you, by looking at the areas that FEDUSA in particular is calling for, where we are wanting to hold hands with all constituencies to advance on these matters, we have to acknowledge the fact that we cannot address inequality, and this comes to the conversation around inequality, poverty, and the levels of jobs, unemployment. We have to, as difficult as it is, emphasize the fact that we cannot address inequality without challenging wealth concentration and calling on those with the means to invest in social development. Zanelli alluded to the expanded definition of unemployment, and something that we must look at, because it is the young workers, the youth, that are being dealt a tremendous blow. What we are calling for is a further investment in the education and training programs that speaks to the skills mismatch, number one, but at the same time speaks to the issue of the jobs of the future. We have to address the persistent economic growth and employment creation challenges, and in our belief, it must be inclusive growth. And as we look towards the future, we've got to look at critical skills as well, as the world of work is continuously changing. That to say we are not dealing with these issues cannot be the order of the day, because ultimately we are saying consequence management must take its course, but most importantly, from a fiducia perspective, and I believe holistically from Labour, we have placed the goods at the table of meritocracy. When you are hired, you must be competent and capable to do the job, because ultimately in the realm of the public service, you are only just going to be doing a disservice to those who need it most. So we've got to look at this from a balanced approach, and we've got to ask everyone to take hands here to address the challenge. But I reiterate once again, we cannot address the challenge without wealth concentration and calling on those with the means to invest in social development in particular, and in these training programs that could assist in taking us to a next level.
I want to bring in the contributions of our listeners here. One of them sends a message, says the battle is won by white labor lawyers and labor relations consultants. Unions are focusing on lying and collecting revenue. They are useless. One of our other listeners says the unions have a golden opportunity to buy ArcelorMittal and establish a cooperative along Marxist lines. Then we will have a concrete example of their philosophy and see if it works. Zanele, let me come to you then. I guess the question is, where to from now? Or is it really going to be much of the same? Are we going to keep going around in circles on this issue?
Well, the truth is, Cathy, that government is in charge. Government is in charge, and they insist on implementing this neoliberal policies of theirs. And is it Einstein who says that insanity is actually doing the same thing over and over again, but then expecting different results? It hasn't worked. It's proven that it hasn't worked, and it's time to do something different. And so we keep raising our voices today. Today there will be different demonstrations. In Cape Town, there's a main demonstration when the budget will be presented. COSATU and other and the sister federations and other progressive civil society organizations are going to be picketing outside Parliament to make sure that we are heard. But if government insists on going down the path that just hasn't taken us anywhere, there isn't much that is going to change. And Trevor is right. It means then we are going to, like you say that, our voices are not what they used to be, but we will then go onto the streets and do what needs to be done. But then at the same time, I don't necessarily think it's true what you've said. I mean, we speak about the Bella Act. And we saw the shenanigans that happened towards its promulgation, but then we fought it. And here we are. The Bella Act is going to be implemented. It was quite an moment when we were watching Minister Siviwe Harube when she presented the matric results, and she spoke about the fact that grade R will now be compulsory. From a woman who wouldn't go to the signing of the Bella Act to a woman that's now advocating one of the clauses of the Bella Act, I would say we are moving somehow slowly. Change doesn't happen over time, but then we are moving. The NHI,
okay.
We have seen the serious opposition against the NHI, and it's something that, as he mentioned, did I say Trevor? I didn't call it. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you Trevor. But as he mentioned, we will have to take up that fight and make sure that the NHI is implemented so that everyone actually has access to universal health care. It's not fair that if you are born in Fenton, then you have the best of healthcare, but then elsewhere, then, if you are from Ishipilong or in Limpopo, then you don't have the same. So we will keep fighting. Recently,
All right.
we are currently busy with the labor law.
I'm going to have to cut it off there with you. I'm so sorry to do that to you. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time for this conversation. Let me thank our guests from COSATU, SAFTU, and FEDUSA for their contributions. That's where we ended today on The Talking Point. The show back with you tomorrow between 9 and midday.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of the book These Things Really Do Happen to Me by Kaya Dang, read by Lerato Mvelase.
In defense of small talk. I've decided to defend small talk. Let me know if you agree or not. One of the things that confuses me about us modern Africans is our sudden hatred for small talk. The idea of small talk is actually foreign, maybe even a Western concept. It became fashionable to say that we hate small talk once we started hearing that there was such a thing. I don't know when I first heard that there was such a thing as small talk, but what I'm sure of is that it was not something I ever heard people complaining about in the villages or townships. In the village, people talk simply for the enjoyment of engaging in conversation, not because there's some deep philosophical discussion taking place. It's just people enjoying each other. Rarely will two strangers simply walk past each other. They will exchange pleasantries before carrying on. Time is not more important than people. In fact, the pleasantries will carry on even after they have said goodbye and are walking in opposite directions. People will keep talking to each other until their voices fade. This is the beauty that we are losing. As Steve Biko put it, Westerners have on so many occasions been surprised at the capacity we have for talking to one another. Not for the sake of arriving at a particular conclusion, but merely to enjoy the communication for its own sake. He went on to say that no one felt unnecessarily an intruder into someone else's business. Perhaps we call it small talk now because we have lost the art of ukuncokola, conversation for its own sake, or we are just too busy hurrying off to places and things. An American being an American in America. The year they called Coachella, Baychella, my friends and I decided to go under the guise of celebrating my birthday, when it was really because everyone wanted to go watch Beyonce. It was myself, Thabo Mkangisa, Troy Gordon, and of course, Xolisa Dyeshana, as well as Unathi Mdoda, Anele Mdoda, Zamalisa Mdoda. Yes, it was almost the whole Mdoda clan. Unfortunately, Thembisa Mdoda couldn't make it because work just wouldn't let her be great. Sizwe Dlomo also couldn't make it because he had a test to write. I don't know if Anele, Beyonce's biggest fan, will ever forgive Sizwe for missing out over a mere test. At Coachella, we would mostly wake up at leisure, then head over to have breakfast at the resort. None of us were in any hurry. We aimed to relax and enjoy the moment as much as we could. The only thing that would spark any real heat, other than the 39 degrees Celsius temperatures, was someone trying to debate whether Beyonce had surpassed Michael Jackson or not. Otherwise, everyone was consistently calm. One morning, after a long breakfast, which had lasted a solid 2 hours, Xolisa and I decided to go outside on some comfortable garden furniture under a big tree. The couches were half-moon shaped, and each half-moon could sit 4 people with a small round table in the middle for drinks. I went to the restroom. I still don't know why it is called that because there's no reason to want to rest there. Why would anyone want to rest in their urine? Or worse, their number 2. And when I returned, I found Xolisa speaking to a white lady in her 60s. "You're from South Africa too?" she asked as I perched my slightly larger than average behind on the couch. I was wearing shorts that showed off my ridiculously sexy legs. "Yes," I replied to the old lady. She wore a straw hat to protect herself from the hell-hot blazing sun of Coachella Valley. "You also came here for the festival?" she asked me. She seemed to be the most unassuming person in the universe. But it was not long before I figured out that she was insanely wealthy, just by how she spoke. Yes, I did, I said, and began to launch into a monologue about how amazing the previous day was. She put her hand on her cheek. She was clearly unsure. Her son then joined her, and she introduced us. She turned to him. Can you believe it? They came all the way here from South Africa just for a music festival, she said disapprovingly. The son was just as incredulous. Can you believe that some people fly all the way from America to South Africa just to see lions and elephants? I retorted. The challenges Black professionals face in the workplace. A few years ago, when I had resigned from a large and reputable company, 5 of the directors each called me to their offices to ask why I was leaving. I had such a great future in the company, they said. Eventually, I had a meeting with the president of the company, who also wanted to know why I had chosen to move on. I explained to her that I had a lot that I still wanted to learn and didn't feel I'd have these opportunities there. I wanted to be scared again. I craved not knowing. She told me she understood, and then she asked me a very important question. Why are so many talented young people leaving the company? I knew that she was really asking why the young Black people were leaving. I didn't claim to be speaking on behalf of anyone, but I told her I would touch on my observations. I felt that people were concerned that they were not being considered for promotions or overseas assignments. She countered, saying that if she looked at her own career, for example, she had not waited for promotions. She had actively sought people in the organization to be her champions. She would look for coaches who knew what roles she wanted, so when those opened up, they would think about her first. People are in charge of their own careers, she said. I agreed wholeheartedly. However, I said, there is a lack of consideration for the African cultural context. I gave an example. When schools opened for Black children in the early 90s, the teachers thought I was insubordinate if I didn't look them in the eye. But in the Black-only schools I had been to before, I was insubordinate for looking teachers in the eye. That is a cultural nuance. I also pointed out that there is often a generation gap between directors and the young talent. Culturally, especially where I came from as a Black person, it is not acceptable to initiate conversations and to become familiar with older people. You must treat older people with respect and be differential towards them. To approach older professionals for help in a corporate environment means going against something that is innate and becoming familiar with older people. That's already a difficult one. And over and above that, there is the racial difference and the context of South Africa's history. The senior person who could help you in your career is not often just older, but also white. Given the history of this country, we can't dismiss these issues. I said to the company president that it may be difficult to explain why she likes Mandy from Bryanston more than Lebu from Soweto. But with Mandy, it may be easier to relate to her because they have similar interests and more things in common than with Lebu. Therefore, it stands to reason that an unconscious cultural bias may cause her to be more connected with Mandy and may cause her to think about Mandy first when a promotion comes up. I recommended that the company implement a system for directors to actively seek out mentees and to break down those cultural gaps by understanding that they exist and not expecting everyone to be like Mandy. Talent will stay if companies really question why people are leaving rather than complaining about it. I was fortunate to be able to connect with many directors in the company and give them my views. But the system is rigged against Blackness, and the powers that be in corporates are often blind to it and don't want to be told about these uncomfortable realities. It is also a false notion that Black talent feels entitled to seniority at a fast pace. I don't believe this is true. Those who are great at what they do know that it takes time to hone their skills and be at the top of their game. They don't expect to get into a company today and be chief executive tomorrow. They just want a fair chance to realize their ambitions. But how do you get a fair chance when nothing is really fair? What many people fail to grasp is the reason for affirmative action legislation in the first place. Some companies have had to be forced to look for, find, and hire Black talent. In the past, these companies simply refused and said there were no qualified black people. Yet many new employees learn on the job and become qualified while doing it.
That was another episode of the book These Things Really Do Happen to Me, written by Kaya Dlanga, read by Lerato Mvelase. The book is available online and in all leading bookstores countrywide. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursdays on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Lerato Mvelase, technical production Wiseman Manele, Nanda Koza, and Tato Mapurum.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation.
It's just gone 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of February, 2025. Warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. We're leading the conversation. I'm John Gericke, standing in for Sakina Kamwendo this afternoon. Coming up this hour.
Theme of this year's protest, we are saying they must end austerity. We are opposed to austerity. As I have said, about 87% of the population depends on public health care system.
Already protests ahead of the finance minister's budget speech this afternoon, and
the acknowledgement that the project hasn't rolled out as well as it should have been. Second,